Player who was once considered one of the world's very best.
The driven shot! Paul Pogba breaks the deadlock in the 41st minute.
But is now considered one of the biggest wasted talents in all of world football.
He's a really experienced player, but he's one of them, he'll get to 35 and he'll be exactly the same.
This is the tragic story of Paul Pogba. In this video, we'll be going over Pogba's rise to being considered one of the world's top footballing talents, and then uncovering the string of unfortunate, reckless, and sometimes unforgivable mistakes that would end up with him risking being banned from the sport for life.
Paul Pogba, who has tested positive.
Despite the turbulent move from France, Pogba settled into life in England well. After a successful run with the Manchester United youth team, he was offered his first call-up to the first team in 2010. Still not fully breaking into the first team squad on a full-time basis and being in and out of the reserve side, Pogba continued with the youth team. He continued working on his craft until he was promoted to the senior team on a permanent basis in the 2011-2012 season, making his official Premier League debut against Stoke City in January of 2012, playing a total of 18 minutes. Even after Paul had made some progress towards becoming a first-team regular, he wasn't happy with the minutes that he was getting to play. The manager at the time, Sir Alex Ferguson, had publicly stated he intended to give the youngster more minutes, otherwise it was likely he would leave the club. But sadly, Paul wasn't quite as patient as Sir Alex would have liked. He was still only 18 years old, but wanted an opportunity to show what he was really capable of. He had shown glimmers of potential, but never really had a consistent opportunity, as of yet, to show it to the world. In 2012, Pogba was allowed to leave Manchester United on a free transfer, which would end up being one of the best pieces of business ever. The youngster signed to Italian giants Juventus, who played in the Serie A, the Premier League of Italy. In his first season with Juve, he made a total of 37 appearances, scoring 5 goals. In this first season, he quickly established himself as a key player in the squad, with the side going on to win the next 4 Serie A titles in the years following, which Pogba played a massive part in. It was in these 4 years that Pogba started to develop a real name for himself, with some considering him to be one of the world's greatest midfield players at the time. At 6'3", his strength and ability to hold players off the ball made him a handful for any of the best teams in Europe. His ability to glide between defenders at speed, showcasing impressive footwork and explosions of pace, was something that Europe hadn't seen in a long time. He had a range of passing that could be compared to the footballing greats, and his ability to finish from range was definitely not something to gloss over. Pogba has always been a player that appeared to be a handful for managers, with a big personality and a clear understanding of how good he was. He had a presence on pitch that was either superb or detrimental. If he was playing well, he could drive a team to a title. If he was playing poorly, however, he brought down the morale of the whole team. In the years 2014 and 2015, he was among the roster of 23 players who were nominated in contention for the most prestigious individual award in world football, the Ballon d'Or, as well as making it into the 2015 FIFA Pro World 11. Still being only 21 at the time, the world saw him as a prospect to become one of the world's greatest players, in an era that still included the likes of Neymar, Messi, and Cristiano Ronaldo. In his 4 years at the club, he would win a total of 9 trophies. This would consist of 4 league titles, 3 Italian Super Cups, and 2 Italian Cups. He made 178 appearances with 34 goals and 41 assists, and solidifying his name in the club's history as one of the most impressive talents. Little did they know, he'd solidify himself in Juventus history in a very different way 8 years later. In the 2016-17 season, Paul Pogba would return to Manchester United on a 5-year contract for a whopping €105 million transfer fee, which at the time made him the world's most expensive player of all time. His first season at the club would be a great one. He would go on to make 51 appearances for the club, scoring 9 goals and helping lead Manchester United to a treble of silverware under the manager at the time, Jose Mourinho. The club would go on to win the Community Shield, FA Cup and Europa League. In a dry period where Manchester United had struggled to find real trophy-winning form, this was a step in the right direction for both the club and for Paul Pogba's career. Pogba put in midfield displays that season that United fans hadn't seen since the club legend Paul Scholes had taken the field, and it was a breath of fresh air to supporters who had seen so much struggle in recent years. However, it wasn't all positive. There were murmurs, critics, and potentially some telling signs of things to come. The most notorious of those being a comment made by footballing pundit Jamie Carragher, which branded Pogba as undisciplined after a 2-1 defeat to arch-rivals Manchester City.
Oh my God, he's the most undisciplined player of all time.
It would become an ongoing critique of Paul in the years to come that he lacked discipline, commitment, and effort, which foreshadows the story to come. The 2017-2018 season was one that United fans were excited for. After a year of settling into Premier League life and coming off the back of a triple, they expected Paul Pogba to take the reins of the Manchester United club and take them back to their winning ways of old. However, after a season with little to no positives and no trophies to show, it ended up being a season to forget. This season was where Pogba started to attract significant criticism, with many branding him as incredibly inconsistent. He would often show glimpses of his old Juventus self, with flashes of the French magician that Italy had grown to adore. However, with lackluster performances and a lack of effort on the pitch, many began to brand him as a flop, especially when tied to his €105 million price tag. This was meant to be Paul's coming out party, a year where he would truly show the world his potential, but this season didn't have that result at all, leaving his future very unknown. The 2018-19 season would be where it all started to go very wrong for Paul, and here's how. United started off the season with their captain, Antonio Valencia, out injured. Mourinho would put his faith in Pogba to captain the team until his return. This was the role that many had thought to be a natural progression, with Paul being the heartbeat of the Manchester United team and having the ability to drive and motivate his teammates through his ability on the pitch. He would go on to start the season well, scoring 4 goals. However, after a string of disappointing results, Mourinho would come out and say that Paul Pogba would never captain Manchester United again, although specifying that there had been no specific fallout between him and the French midfielder that had caused this decision. Paul would go on to be dropped for the following game against Derby County in the Carabao Cup, which would end in shock defeat, losing 8-7 on penalties. We're sure Paul was probably thinking, that's what you get for leaving me out of the squad. In late September, the two would end up having a very notorious public fallout on the training pitch of the Carrington facility, where the two exchanged words, in which Pogba and the coach in shot looked shocked at what the Portuguese manager had said. There are rumours that this fallout was due to an Instagram story made by Paul laughing with friends, which happened to line up with United's shock defeat to Derby, but the two never confirmed specifics, and we'll never know if his story was really about the game. Following a continued poor spell of results and a continuously deteriorating relationship between Pogba and Mourinho, by Christmas he would often be left out on the bench, with consistent rumours that he would be departing the club in the January transfer window. The Portuguese manager was quoted calling Paul a virus who negatively influenced the form of the team. He would sit on the bench for the next 3 games until a 3-1 loss to Liverpool was the nail in the coffin that had Jose sacked from the club, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer being appointed as interim manager. Under the temporary manager, Paul saw a revival of form, scoring 16 goals and putting up 11 assists for the Reds. On paper, this looked like a great season for Pogba, but we know that wasn't the case. When your central midfielder has to put up numbers like this and you're still not winning anything, it's probably not a good sign. Over the next 3 seasons, it was more of the same. In almost every transfer season, there'd be rumours he'd move elsewhere, with one occasion having the Frenchman saying it could be a good time to find a new challenge somewhere else. He'd failed to do anything remarkable for Manchester United and continued to attract warranted criticism for his performance for the Reds. Having notorious feuds with multiple pundits who publicly ridiculed him, the aura around Paul had gone from one of the world's most exciting transfers to one of football's biggest disappointments. And if you thought it couldn't get any worse, just you wait. Pundit Graham Souness consistently spoke poorly of Pogba and his evaluations of his performances, criticising his work rate, his desire to help the team, and his ability to learn from his managers to do his job. Manchester United legend Roy Keane shared the same sentiment, towards the end of Pogba's last contract with the club, stating that there are 4 or 5 players whose contracts are nearly up. People think that that is a bad thing. I think it might be a good thing. Also stating, the real top players make their teammates better, and he doesn't do that. He plays for himself. After 6 disappointing years back at United, and achieving very little of serious merit, Paul would make the decision to leave at the expiration of his contract. On the 11th of July 2022, Paul would announce that he would be returning to Juventus, a club where he had first become a superstar. In order for Juventus to sign him, however, the World Cup winner had to take a 55% wage cut in comparison to his earnings at Manchester United. But don't feel too bad, this left him with a measly £160,000 a week, only $8 million a year. Poor guy. However, only 15 days later after this transfer, Pogba would suffer a knee injury that would see him sidelined for at least 2 months, and ruled him out of any club competitions until the World Cup of 2022. He eventually made his Juventus debut in February of 2023, 8 months after his initial signing. The next month would see him make a string of appearances off the bench, attempting to get back to his full fitness, until in March of 2023, he was dropped by manager Massimiliano Allegri due to disciplinary reasons, stating that he had turned up late to a team event. 4 days later, it was reported that Pogba had suffered yet another injury in training that would have him out for a further 3 weeks. Pogba returned to the field in May of 2023 in a league match against Cremonese, seemingly back in favour with the manager, but after only 23 short minutes he had to be substituted due to a muscle injury in his thigh. After further scans, it would be reported that Paul would be out for the remainder of the season, after only playing a total of 161 minutes for the club over a 10-month spell. It was at this point that it was reported Juventus was seeking to lower his salary, after only making a handful of appearances and failing to justify his massive salary. But in October of 2023, Pogba would hit rock bottom. After failing a random drug test for testosterone B, a performance-enhancing substance, Pogba would face an indefinite ban that could see him gone from football entirely.
Paul Pogba, who has tested positive for testosterone in counter-analysis on a second sample, or a B test as it's known.
Any form of performance-enhancing drugs are not allowed in football. However, if Paul is able to prove that he took the drug unintentionally, which he is claiming to have done, he may be able to reduce the length of his ban to 2 years. Still not ideal, with the midfielder recently turning 30 and moving into the final chapters of his career. At this time, Pogba is likely considering whether he wants to continue playing football, regardless of the result. This string of poor choices, poor performances and bad transfers has left the midfielder a shell of who he once was. It has been reported that due to this ban, Pogba has been reduced to a £2,000 a week salary. This is a drastic change from his £160,000 salary that he was signed for. The story of his ban is still unfolding, but I think we can all agree that Paul Pogba is one of the biggest what-ifs in world football. Once a rising star with seemingly unlimited potential, has now become a shocking disappointment.